Oh, buddy, I've got a long one for you today. I tell you what. So, character setup. Now we're going to get into some fun shit here. Let's make a character. Although this video touches upon the general concepts of how to make a character in Cypher, I will be walking through this process step by step in Foundry for the groups in Cypher Unlimited and Friendo Discord that I know that use the Foundry virtual tabletop. Also, this is using my setup with the compendium information. In the case of a lot of people that aren't in my specific social circles that don't have access to this setup, you're going to have to type in the abilities yourself. It's the way it is, but I mean, it's not that much different than if you had a paper character sheet at a table, right? You'd be referencing the books depending on what your ability is, so not a big deal. So firstly, you're going to need to make a new actor sheet in Foundry. We did this previously on explaining the Foundry virtual tabletop for Cypher video that is earlier in this series, so I'm not going to go over that again, but we have a new character sheet right here. Check that out if you need to know how to do that. Oh, that new character smell. Before we make any choices for the character, there are a few settings I think it's good to look at. That can change from campaign to campaign, so let's click on the settings tab. It's just the gear thing right here. Go there right now. The first thing we want to look at is the additional sentence field. I use this a lot in my games. If your game master is allowing certain flavors or specialty races or something else specific to that campaign, you may want to have this checked. I'm going to check that box, and I'm actually going to type in flavor. So we're going to Flavor Town. I spelt it Canadian because I did. Certain campaigns may have some special pools here. In many of our games, we use a custom thing called action points. So I'm going to check that box, and then I'm going to put in AP for action points. But there may be other things such as luck or infection rates in like a post-apocalyptic setting, or who knows, all sorts of other things. I'm also going to change this for the AP to be 1 because that's how we run. I'll do a video on our action point thing in the future. Changes the game a little bit, but honestly, better. Tags, show tags. It's a relatively new feature that were just added to this by the system developers for the Cypher Foundry or Foundry Cypher. It seems like it's going to be useful. You can like add tags to things, so if you can just like search it up by the tag rather than going through the different areas trying to find something. Really cool, especially if you have things on your character sheet not deleted off the character sheet but archived so that they can be hidden. I haven't played with it much though, so I'm just gonna leave it alone for this video, but I think it is something that we want to explore in the future, and once I play with it a bit more, maybe I'll do a video on it. I think that'd be pretty cool. Skill tab. Let's go to the skill categories. Skill categories are completely up to you. Oftentimes, I personally like to have it set to combat, crafting, practical, and languages, so I'm gonna set that here. Combat, crafting, practical, and languages. But you can have anything. In our Cyberpunk campaign, where I'm an actual player, not the GM for once, he just has it set up to be just combat and skills, just for the needed combat stuff and the skills, and nice and simple, not too bad. I tend to split it up more, but it's up to you. You don't have to have, you can have it whichever way you want. It's not even a campaign thing. It is up to you. If you are playing a superhero game or a game where you have obscene amounts of power, like being literal gods, then you want power shifts to be checked right here. This adds a power shifts area to your skills section. You can also rename it if something is being used instead of power shifts. I can't think of what would be used there at the moment, but I mean, you can be super creative with it. Maybe that's where, instead of in equipment, maybe that's where you want to have cyberware in the character, or special spells, or something like this. So power shifts, yeah, that's generally used for extra powers of some kind. The actual power shifts rules themselves, which I will do a video on in the future, makes your character overpowered on purpose. I mean, it is meant for literal gods or superheroes. So let's go to the combat tab. Well, first of all, looking at the number of recovery rolls here, these will be affected by your class, like the descriptor and focus and everything. That's not something you have to worry about now. That's only something you have to worry about when you're making your character and you made your decisions. It'll let you know if you have to change this in like the focus. One thing you do have to worry about is lasting permanent damages, because I use those in my games, and most of the GMs around me use those in our game. So we're going to click that. We're also going to click ammo list, because we do keep track of ammo as well, at least for most campaigns. Maybe there will be certain ones we don't. But for like the Cyberpunk game we're in and the Numenera game that I'm running and stuff like that, we are tracking ammo. Ammo's a thing. Ammo's important. Let's move on. Like skills, ability categories are up to you. I mean, I personally like to put them as action and enabler, which are the Cypher terms used for active abilities or passive abilities. Basically, these ones are like things that you actually activate. Often it costs you from your pool to activate it, whereas an enabler is just some sort of thing that modifies your character passively. You can have all sorts of different ability things, plus a spells slot if you are running with the optional spells things. If you're playing in a fantasy genre, that could be a thing. If your campaign uses a currency in the equipment tab, you're going to want to click the currency box, which actually adds a little bit there. Then you choose the number of currency types that you have. So if it's just the one, like say you're just using dollars or shins in the case of Numenera or something like that, you just have one currency. But if you want all these different currency things, you would apply multiple levels of currency. The active boxes for some reason are programmed right to left instead of left to right in the way we normally read, which is kind of odd. A little backwards, you figure, but hey, whatever. So if you only have one currency type, then you need to change the rightmost currency type. In this case, the shins box. The default is shins because the currency for the Numenera setting, which is the original setting for Cypher, is shins. We're just going to leave that for now. Finally, your game master will let you know if you need areas for artifacts, oddities, crafting materials, etc. You check what is appropriate. These may also get renamed. For example, in our Cyberpunk game, I believe one of the categories, I'm thinking oddities, was actually renamed to cyberware. I forget how he set it up. Forget which one he chose. I'm going to leave the names default, but I am going to activate them on my character sheet now, just for funsies. You don't have to do this step, but it is something that you will greatly appreciate in the future. We're going to go to the description area. Now, click the edit button and type in the following: descriptor, type, focus, and because we added flavor. By having this in your character sheet, we're going to do something that will thank yourself later for. And I should mention that to edit it, you click the little button here, and then afterwards, after you've made a change, save button is this one. Did that a little fast, probably should show it. Now comes the big moment, actually deciding what your character is. I'm going to edit the description area here just so as I decide things, I can bring it in here and remember. I'm going to make sure that it is in the areas that I want to choose as we choose them. It's entirely up to you what order you decide to make your character in. Everyone likes to do it differently. Some people prefer to put the descriptor first to narrow down the personality and who that character is. Some people prefer the type first to get a baseline of your abilities and stats. Some people prefer focus first to figure out what your cool, unique stuff is with the character. In this case, we're going to assume this is a fantasy genre, partly because I haven't finished typing in all of the things for some of the other genres yet, and I'm super lazy. I have a concept that I want to make, a sort of like this serene, calm, awesome, unarmed warrior, maybe like a monk-like type thing. Let's see what we can find for that. In my games, we can find all of our character options in the Compendiums tab. Right here, it's that little closed book with the circle thing on it. Other game masters may not have this set up. Remember, I've mentioned this in previous videos. This is not the default with Foundry due to copyright reasons. You may have to look through the actual books, which I actually own copies of, to find what you want and then type it in yourself. However, for my group, I already did all of the super fun time data entry. So for you guys, we get to look at the options in Foundry and just drag and drop what we want. Are you excited? I wasn't for the hours it took me to do this. I know I want this character to have some sort of, I'm thinking calm or wise demeanor, but then as I look at the descriptors, in this case, we're just going to stick with the standard Cypher descriptors. And I look at calm, I'm like, oh, calm seems neat, until I realize inability, you're not a fighter, all physical attacks are hindered. Ugh, no, that's not what we want. So we're not going to do the calm to me. Instead, one that I remember was pretty good for this is we're going to look for graceful. And there's a search box up here if you already know what you're looking for. So for the descriptor, you're going to drag in graceful. Now, what is that strange jumble of code that we just brought over? What happened? Oh, don't worry, that's on purpose. This is a link to the descriptor that we just brought over. If you now save this on your character sheet, boom, you will see that there is a new button there that you can click that brings up the descriptor for graceful. This is why I suggest having this in your description. Now, I want to refer back to what your options are. You don't have to go hunting for them. They'll be clickable. Now, if you want to go back to refer to what your options are, you don't have to go hunting for them. They'll be clickable right in your character sheet. Let's edit this area again and fill in the other options. So we're going to close the descriptors, and next we're going to do our type. This is kind of like the baseline class of your character. We know we have this like warrior monk vibe thing going on. So going into general Cypher, since it's not a Numenera game, I look at the different types and warrior, that seems pretty good. I'm going to make sure my cursor is set there because it will drag and drop to wherever your cursor has been set. And we're going to click and drag warrior over, and warrior is in. That will give us all the cool shit that we need. And you can open these up directly from in here when you're looking through them, by the way. You don't have to drag them over and click from there. You can open them directly from these compendium interfaces. All right, so we have warrior. Now we need our focus. Now I've already done my homework on what kind of focus I want, as usual. Lots of choices in Cypher. I have decided that I want needs no weapons. So I'm just going to search for it. Needs no weapons. There we go. Make sure focus is selected. Boom. Needs no weapons. After all, we're a monk-like. We don't need weapons, right? We're fighting with our fists. Although we could use weapons. Maybe a staff or something like that. We'll get to that in a moment. Awesome. Awesome sauce. And of course, if you were in, say, like a superhero genre or Numenera or something, like there are other foci that may be specific to those areas that you want to look at. Lastly, in this case, it's an optional step. If you have some other bit to your character sheet, in this case, we're using the flavors, you can then do a flavor. Now, flavors are a way to modify your type. Each time you choose an ability from your type, you can instead choose an ability from your flavor. However, this overwrites one of the abilities from your available type, making it no longer available to you. So if I choose a flavor here and I decide to take an ability from it, I will lose one of the abilities that I could have taken from warrior. This only happens when you choose an ability though, and it's completely optional if and when you do this. So honestly, there's not really a downside to taking the flavor. You could take the flavor and never use it, never lose anything from your type. Or you can cherry pick, mix and match. All super nice. I like the idea of this unarmed warrior monk having some like mystical abilities, more like a D&D monk. So I think I'm going to go into flavors. We're going to go into the regular ones here. We're going to ignore some of these other ones here. And we're going to choose magically. Now you'll notice that I rename these slightly. Normally the flavors are just like combat, magic, skill, and knowledge, stealth. But because of where we have flavors in the sentence, it makes more sense for me to type them as combatively, magically, skillfully, stealthily, etc. We're just going to save this, and now we have all of our buttons for all aspects of the character. I'm just going to type these in the box above so that we can reference it easier in the future. Unfortunately, you can't drag these links into these above boxes. I was kind of hoping they would find a way to do that, but unfortunately, not yet. Weapons and magic. So now you see our new character is a graceful warrior who needs no weapons magically. this sentence states who you are. I think that's a really cool way to do classes. And it sort of cobbles everything together. And of course, as true with any role-playing game, you can reflavor things. One more thing to drag in before we can move on. Next, we need to bring in some required skills. So we're going to open up the skills compendium. We're going to go to the required. And we're going to bring all of these ones over, because these are kind of used no matter what you're doing. Here we go. And we can close this out. These skills are used basically no matter what, as long as there's combat in the game, which it's not often you're going to run an RPG without some sort of conflict, even if it's not combat, a conflict of some kind. You're going to need these. So these are super basic defenses in case you get trained in it or something like that. Your initiative is really important because that's going to determine, you're going to roll this to determine where you are in your initiative order during a conflict, and then if you have any issues with weapons. You don't have to have all of these in here except for initiative. Initiative you always must have in here. You technically only have to bring them in if they have an inability, are trained, or specialized, as is true with the other skills. I only bring them in if they have some sort of training, specialized, or an inability. If you're just practiced, it's just a straight stat pool roll anyways. It is optional for you to put all the other skills in. I like having all 7 of these combat skills in just in case, because you never know what's going to modify them. So I like to do that. I would suggest doing that as well. Now we need to get into the nitty-gritty details of our character. No matter what order you choose your options in, we now have to start with your type as the baseline. So let's go back to our description. We're going to click on our type, which is warrior, so we can bring this up and put it to the side. Just going to resize these a little bit, actually hide these. Love how modular everything is in Foundry, so we can just move things around as needed. There's a lot of fun information in the overview and in the player intrusions area. You might want to read these when you're actually making your character, but I'd like to actually finish this video someday, and this is going to be one of the lengthier videos in the series. So we're just going to skip these for now. We're just going to minimize. We're going to go straight to features. Stat pools let us know what our starting pools are, and then if we have any extra points to spend. In this case, our starting pools for a warrior are 10 might, 10 speed, 8 strength, 8 intelligence, intellect. I can speak. It's fine. And of course, using the custom action point rules, which I'll go over in the future, 1 action point. Awesome. Although that might be changing to 0. We're refining something. We'll see. We'll see. Now we get 6 additional points to spend to divide among your stat pools however you wish. I think I'm going to put 4 into speed, bringing this to a 14 out of 14, and 2 into might. This way we're a little bit more robust and tough, but we're going to really rely on that super agile flexibility of this awesome warrior monk that we are creating. Right. Now we're going to move on to the tier benefits here. Your effort, by default, is set to 1. I believe all of the types have this, but it's good to double check just in case there's a custom type in the game that you're playing that maybe has it higher for some reason. So our effort in the upper right corner here, C, is set to 1. Perfect. Physical nature. You have a might edge of 1 and a speed edge of 0, or a might edge of 0 and a speed edge of 1, and either way your intellect edge is 0. Basically, what this means is either your might or your speed can have an edge of 1. We're going to put edge in speed here. For more about what edge does and the pools themselves, refers to some of the previous videos before this one. I explain what the pools are, I explain what effort and edge do. That'll let you know which is probably a good one to put in. There you go. Cypher use. You can bear 2 ciphers at one time. Ciphers are a type of equipment, so we're going to go to the equipment tab. Under ciphers, you're going to see we have a limit. The default is 2, because most characters start with that, although there are some exceptions for types, like Adepts in General Cypher or Nanos in Numenera. They have actually a slightly higher cipher limit, and you might have a focus or something that increases it. But by default, we have it set at 2. We're supposed to have 2. We are good to go. Weapons. You become practiced with light, medium, and heavy weapons and suffer no penalties when using any kind of weapon. Awesome. Well, that means we can leave these as practiced. Many other types may only give you, say, light weapons, and then like heavy and medium will have an inability, in which case you're going to want to adjust these. That's really easy to do. You just click on the little notes thing here. Basically, this little piece of paper thing is to open the item sheet itself. In this case, it would be weapons heavy. Here, you can change it from practiced to specialized, trained, practiced, or inability. If it was inability, aka we were not good with these types of weapons, we would click that and you would see instantly it updates on your character sheet. Inability, in bright red, saying, you're trying to use a heavy weapon? Oh, you're screwed, buddy. So yeah, but we are practiced, so we're going to keep it practiced. Also, this is where you can preset some certain things. If for some reason you get an asset on all heavy weapons, you would be able to put it here so that when you roll heavy weapons, it automatically always applies an asset. Anything else that you have here, it's the same thing as the rolling box, which you can go back to the rolling video to review. It's all the same variables, so you can adjust them here. Also, one of the most important things is your initiative. You'll notice that this doesn't have a normal roll icon. This has a fist, and it's different. That's because if we go in here and we go into the gear, we see that this box right here, use roll results as initiative roll, is checked. So as long as there is a combat created in the combat area, there is not right now, so it wouldn't work. But as long as there is a combat, you can click it. There's no combat, so it doesn't work. But as long as there is a combat made by the game master, you can click it. It will add you to the combat list, and it'll roll your initiative, and you can make all the choices for things like if you're going to apply effort to ease it, or if you have assets or anything. Plus, if you're trained, and basically anything you have with your initiative automatically applies to there. This is why it's important to roll your initiative through here rather than in something like Dungeons and Dragons, where a lot of times people actually clicked in the combat tracker to roll their initiative. More important in Cypher, for those familiar with Foundry that have played other systems, to roll it from your character sheet, because you get all those options that could adjust your initiative dramatically. Okay, all right, so many things to explain. Let's do this. Next, we're going to do equipment. Starting equipment, we start with appropriate clothing, 2 weapons of your choice, plus an expensive item, 2 moderately priced items, and up to 4 inexpensive items. Cool. Let's just minimize that for 1 second here. We're going to go back to the compendiums. In character options, I have equipment. Now we have, I have mostly just the fantasy stuff in here right now. I'm in the middle of typing up to import the modern and sci-fi. Part of the reason we chose a fantasy character right now. But we have combat tab items for some default weapons and armor. We have some other generic items for some other redundant things, as well as like loot and shins and whatnot. We don't really have to worry too much about these right now. But we also have all of our different items that you can find in the genre. Like for instance, in a fantasy genre specifically, instead of just having, say, light, medium, or heavy armor and a shield, you might have a specific one. In this case, armor might have a breastplate or brigandine or chainmail. They're still considered light, medium, or heavy armor, but yeah, it's a little more detailed depending on the genre that you're playing in. A modern one might have a flak vest or a leather jacket or a trench coat or something like that. So in this case, we start out with a bunch of things. I'm not going to go through and do all the equipment in this. I mean, that's just shopping. You don't really need to see this. In this case, we are going to give him a weapon. Let's give a staff. And one thing about equipment, if it's general equipment and you add it, let's add a backpack. We're going to move 1. There we go. We've got a backpack. Awesome. Let's give him some dry rations as well. We're going to move 1, but we're going to say he had like 3 days of dry rations just for surviving. That all appears in your equipment. But armor and weapons and ammo all appear in the combat tab instead. So if I go here and I find a staff and I drag it over, it'll appear in the attacks area. So a little bit of a weird divide with equipment. I kind of see why they did this. I'm still not sure how I feel about it, but yeah, all attacking stuff and defending stuff is found in the combat tab, even if it's like a piece of equipment like a staff. So I can see why they did it. All right, let's close this for now. We're not going to do the rest of the equipment shopping. You can figure that out on your own. Let's open up Warrior again and see what's next. Special abilities! Choose 4 of the abilities listed below. You can't choose the same ability more than once unless its description says otherwise. Also, there's one more caveat. It doesn't say here. Remember when we said that our flavor modifies our type? So we are a warrior that is magically. So a warrior that's magically means, and let's bring up the magically as well. Description, magically, means that we choose 4 abilities. Technically, we choose 4 abilities from both of these tier 1 lists. But whenever we choose an ability from magically, we have to scratch out one of these abilities. We won't be able to use it. I will show you how to sort of make a note of that so you remember which one that you've kind of locked yourself out on. So, what abilities do we want? So, we're going to go in our abilities. We're going to choose Combat Prowess. We are going to choose No Need for Weapons. And we're going to choose Trained Without Armor. After all, Combat Prowess, we hit hard. No need for weapons. We can hit really nicely with our fists. And Trained Without Armor means that we get a little bit of a boost on our speed defense task, aka dodging out of the way, because we don't have armor to soak that. So we're super agile, awesome monk dude. But for the 4th ability, I want something a little mystical in here. We want this like mystical, magical monk thing, right? So we're going to go to magically. And we have chosen Entangling Force. I think it'd be cool to have your character like run up and like strike someone with a pressure point and suddenly they're entangled and unable to move. You can flavor this however you want. It could have been like a magical thing or roots coming up from the ground or something like this, but I like flavoring things depending on the character. So we're going to bring over Entangling Force. Cool. Problem. One problem. We have chosen something from magically, which means we have to choose something from here that we've lost. So we're going to go in here and we are going to edit the description. And don't worry, if you edit this description here, it doesn't edit it from the base power. This stays the same. You're not changing anything. You do not have that power, not as a player. If you edit it here, it's just editing the version that's on your character sheet. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go down here. I'm going to do replaces, and I'm going to choose what it replaced. I'm going to say probably practiced in armor because I don't see us wearing armor anyways. I'm actually going to just hold this and save. And there we go. So now, whenever we want to choose anything, we will see that this replaces practiced in armor. So we can no longer choose practiced in armor because in its place, we have decided that Entangling Force is there instead. Now we move on. We will bring up our descriptors and focus and anything else that's in there. So we have chosen our abilities. We're done with the type because after this is tier 2 and we're not tier 2 yet. So we go back, we're going to do our descriptor. Our descriptor. So we see first thing is agile +2 to your speed pool. So boom, whoops, +2, not 2. 16, 14 to 16. Excellent. Go to skills, because next is we get 3 skill things right in a row. You're trained in all tasks that involve balancing and careful movement. Now skills in Cypher, unless your GM has set up something specific. Skills in Cypher are a little more loosey-goosey. It's not a very specific skill list like it is in Dungeons and Dragons, because all a game master is ever going to do is he's going to tell you to roll one of the 3 stats. It's up to you to let him know if there's a skill that kind of applies to the situation. In this case, balance and careful movement. Now, I do have example skills in here if you so wish. I do have like a movement skill if you just wanted to drag that over. You could do that. But in this case, I'll delete that. In this case, we are going to make a balance and what was it? Careful movement. Because that is the descriptive term of this actual skill. And it says that we are trained. Excellent. One other thing, actually, let's bring that back up again, is I have this set into different tabs. Remember, I had it set to combat, crafting, practical, and languages. I think this is a practical skill. So in the settings of that skill, we're going to set it to practical. Awesome. Super awesome. We are also trained in all tasks involving in physical performing arts. Cool. So I guess it'd be like dance and stuff like that. So physical performing arts. We are trained in this, and we are going to put this in practical as well. Sweet, sweet, sweet. And finally, we are trained in all speed defense tasks. Now, we already have a speed defense thing here. We're just going to click on the button to open the sheet to edit it. We're just going to click up here. We don't need the gear icon. Go to trained, and it is trained. Now, when we do a speed defense, so if I was, say, trying to dodge out of the way of an arrow, and the GM says, okay, well, yeah, how are you defending? And in this case, I would be like, I'm just trying to dodge out of the way. You'd say, okay, that's a speed roll. And I'd say, well, my speed defense applies in this situation. And I would roll speed defense. It's trained. I automatically get it eased. Boom, done. And that's it. The last thing is like a role-playing thing. You can choose or roll or even come up with your own. It doesn't have to be these. It's just a link to the starting adventure. It's just like in the type, there's like extra RP stuff to go through yourself. I'm not going to cover those in this video because it's going to be long enough. Excellent. Let's close that. We'll go back to description. And the last thing we have is our focus. And the neat thing about focus is generally there's not too much in the way of choices until you get to like tier 3. So we go back to our abilities. We're going to have 2 more to bring over. We have Fists of Fury and Flesh of Stone. Yeah, completely optional step because I have set, just like in skills, how I'd had the different categories, and abilities I had set 2 categories, action and enabler. So we're going to go through each one of these. So this one, actually, I can just see it from here. This one is an enabler. So I'm actually going to edit it, and I'm going to change it to the enabler section that I had set up. Entangling Force is an action to initiate. That is an enabler. Almost everything we have is an enabler. So I am going to change all of these just to keep it nice and organized. Once again, this is completely optional. You don't have to do this. I'm just a sucker for organization, don't you know? Hell yeah. Okay. Now, you're going to want to go through each one of these abilities and adjust things as needed depending on the ability. Now, Entangling Force is an active ability. There's probably not anything else on your character sheet to adjust because of it. Although you might want to make like an attack for it or something. But the rest of these can make some adjustments. Combat Prowess. Add +1 damage to one type of attack of your choice, melee attack or ranged. So I'm actually going to choose, since we have to choose, I'm going to choose melee by editing the title here just so I can remember. And boom. In combat, we're going to have our staff. We're also going to, let's go back to equipment for a second. Go to combat tab items. Weapon light. So the default for unarmed attacks, and we'll adjust this in a second. For the default for unarmed attacks is light. Actually, let's get rid of this for a second because I already know that our no need for weapons provides a medium weapon instead of light for unarmed attack. So we're going to open equipment. We're going to bring over a weapon medium. We're going to rename this to unarmed strike. Oh yeah, so now we're going to punch with a 4, but we're doing a +1 damage on all melee attacks. So we're going to bump these up to a 5. Sweet. So that gets our combat prowess out of the way. Fists of Fury. You inflict 2 additional points of damage with unarmed attacks. Oh boy. So we're going to go back here. We're going to find our unarmed strike. And we're going to bring this up to 7. We're now doing 7 damage with a strike. That is whopping amount. Flesh of Stone. You have +1 armor if you do not wear physical armor. Enabler. Cool. So we're going to go back to the combat here. Now, we could drag in like actual physical armor, but armor, as we will explain in a future video, has a cost to it. What we have here isn't a armor with a cost. It's not light, medium, or heavy armor as it's normal. So we're just going to make a new one. We're just going to put in 1 armor rating. And we're just gonna, it's from, what's the name of the ability? Flesh of Stone. So we're just gonna name it the same thing, Flesh of Stone. There we go. So now we have a total armor of 1, which is really cool. Any attacks that come in will be lowered. The damage will be lowered by 1, unless it's like a mental attack or something that bypasses armor. Sweet. No need for weapons. We've already done. That's what made it a medium weapon. And trained without armor, you're trained in speed defense tasks, which we have already done right here. Ah, we're done. That's it. We've made a character from scratch. I mean, there's a few other little things you might want to tinker with, like your equipment and stuff like that, but we're done. We're done. And of course, like, you're going to want to set a name, maybe do a picture, stuff like that. That's it. I know this one was a little longer than the others, but character creation is one of the bigger concepts to tackle in basically any RPG. As you can see, it's not really that hard. You just have to have a good few choices to make, and then everything else just kind of falls into place. This is creation in Cypher, and specifically also character creation in my Foundry setup. Excellent. Have yourself a good one.